For my philosophy class, I did a research argumentative paper over are zoos ethical, based on Immanuel Kant's categorical imperatives. My broader question was, are zoos ethical? But once I got into researching that, I realized that there were some deeper questions that needed to be answered, like were the start of zoos ethical, are modern day zoos ethical, and would terminating all zoos right now be ethical? And my findings were, yes, modern day zoos are ethical.
The errors that you make on an exam are going to be the little things that maybe you forgot in calculus 2. Maybe integration scares you. Maybe you forgot significant figures from chemistry, or maybe you didn't even take chemistry. So in my website, I have different sections, including reference videos, reference documents. There are buttons located throughout where it highlights each of the sections you will learn in a particular curriculum. And if you click on the button, it will either take you to a reference document with like unit conversions or some sort of math, or it will take you to a YouTube video to go step by step on how to do it.
CML stands for chronic myeloid leukemia, and I separated my presentation into 4 parts. It is what is CML, which is a brief description of everything that makes up CML. It's got a section on what causes it, so what happens in the bones and stuff like that. CML is a type of bone cancer. It lists some treatment options for different stages of the cancer and what affects those treatment options, and then the final section is the prognosis. Basically, CML is treatable, and it goes into a little more detail on what affects that. I also did a project on J.P. Guilford's structure of intellect. For psychology, my goal for my project, set by my teacher, John Pate, was to find something that was briefly mentioned in our textbook and elaborate on that. So I went about finding something that was only mentioned once in the textbook, and that was J.P. Guilford and his structure of intellect. And I go through and summarize how he came up with the idea, and he basically separates the idea of intellect into a cube figure.
My project was to recruit people for the Eco Club in Cumberland County. So I researched and I was trying to find the best way to recruit people, and so we decided that a poster board would work the best. And so my honors project was to put out a poster board and explain stuff about the Eco Club to students at the Cumberland County campus.
I did my project on blue light filtering, whether it's legit or a gimmick. So I got some opinions about doctors, opticians, went and did research with doctors all around the world to see if that was, in fact, a real thing or not. I did find that a lot of doctors recommend more of the anti-reflective coating, along with doing the 20-20-20 rule. Those 2 main things are the ones that we do go towards instead of that blue light filtering a little.
I did online ordering versus in-person ordering for glasses. I found that ordering in person is a lot better because there's less likely of error, and if there is an error, you have someone to kind of blame, and the opticians can fix all those errors, but they're less likely to commit the errors. If you order online, you're the one to blame.
We're super excited to have families with us today, as well as students and faculty who are joining us. This program is very near and dear to my heart. I've had many students over the years work on honors projects, and it's just such a cool thing to see what sparks a student's interest, to have them learn more about that topic and then share it with others. And I hope that all of you will be sure to brag about yourselves to others, that you've taken the initiative to go ahead and do these projects, and not only just show them to your professors or maybe your class, but here to present them in this forum. I think you really all deserve a round of applause, so thank you, students. All right, so before we get started with the student program, we're very honored to have President Chris Whaley here, as well as Vice President Diane Ward. I'm going to let Chris go ahead and just give you a little welcome, and then we have 3 exciting presentations coming up from our students. And if you haven't already, feel free to scan the QR code on some of the tables if you want to see all the list. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I promise I will be brief. No one wants to hear me this afternoon, but I do appreciate the opportunity to get to say welcome, not only to our fine students, but again, Sylvia said, to the wonderful families who support them in doing these projects. And You know, as she just said, but I think it bears repeating, the initiative that it takes for you to take on an extra project really is something that we applaud, and something I hope that you will pat yourself on the back and brag about, and that you'll continue, because in every walk of life, I speak particularly, of course, for higher education, I mean, we are looking for folks as a part of our programs, as a part of our faculty and staff, folks who are taking that initiative to take the extra step and not just do the minimum. I mean, you all are all scholars in your own right, just for the work that you do that's required in the courses, and then to take that extra step of doing something extra, doing it so well, is really something that we applaud. And so one more round of applause, please, for these students and all the great work. Sylvia already mentioned her fellow sponsors, but I think that they deserve a round of applause for Sylvia, for Jimmy, and for Beth for the great job that they do in leading the honors program. They put in a lot of work and a lot of dedication into supporting you, and I know I speak for Dr. Ward when we say to all three of them, thank you very much. Thanks for letting us be a part, and let's enjoy the presentations.
All right, so I would like to welcome our first presenter, Bre. She is doing a presentation about women in the workplace, and her faculty sponsor was Valerie Hurd.
Had to adjust it to my hop. Hi, I'm Bre Broaddus, and I am doing Women in the Workplace, and I also added a little of why we shouldn't give up. Throughout the course of mankind leading up to today, women have never really been expected to be the breadwinner of the household. We have been continuously underestimated by men and other women just alike. We as women need to encourage each other to defy the odds, not to be just the same Barbie doll that everybody wants us to be, but to be unique, be different, not try to go up to society's standards, defy them. We as women also have been discouraged to become so many things in this world. For example, CEOs of companies, congresswomen, or anything else really of that matter. We need to be inspired to change that. We, from the beginning of time, have been expected to just be the wife, be the caregiver of the children, make meals, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when we're told it's not that hard, that's when it's a problem. Women have never been expected to do any kind of manual labor or to make incomes. They did what their husbands They did what their husbands wanted, no ifs, ands, or buts about it, in the 1800s through most of the 19th. I desire to see a generation of women who are not suppressed, but unstoppable, courageous, independent, and daring to be different. Even in the year 2022, women are not taken as seriously as they should be in jobs such as company CEOs, political leaders, or even engineers. When most people think of a company leader in New York, they see a man in a business suit. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just how our brains are wired. But I want to see a new generation where it could be both. I want to see a generation where we can say, hey, they're a very strong and independent woman. They can do that just as well as a man can. Right now, in this very moment, I hope everyone here decides to make an impact after today. We need to show our younger generation of girls whatever they put their hearts into, they can do it. They don't need to be told that's a man's job or only a man should do that. They need to know that they can do whatever their heart desires. In current time, there are many successful women CEOs, like the famous Kim Kardashian. Believe it or not, at one point in time, she did not start at the very top. She and her family had a small business in Los Angeles. It was a small boutique store, and they put all their blood, sweat, and tears and hard work into this, and it's one of the most successful companies in the world. Now, on another note, women in politics is another big career that they're frowned upon. Ever since there has been kings and queens roaming in the lands and great rulers of different countries, everyone expects it to be a man. Women are discouraged and still are for being president or ruler of this country, or pretty much any country as a matter of fact. And they tell us we are not strong enough, but I tell you today, we are strong enough. We can do it. More than 40% of women, well, only 40% or less of women are in politics for America today. Women in certain areas where they live and were raised have no business of our country's affairs, and this is this is a biased, unfair judgment to make for anyone. And lastly, women who are engineers, they are oppressed in their field. In the year 2021, 76% of women who have careers in this field are treated inequivalent to their coworkers. That do exact same job as them, but they get different pay or they get treated different. We are underrepresented in this field, much like politics. We are underrepresented because nobody wants to defy those odds. Nobody wants to be the different kind of woman or be the different at all. They just want to stay in the standards, stay in their lane, but that's not what we need in this world. We need ones who go outside of the lane, who go outside the comfort zones. Let's come together and show the ones that are younger that we support them, and no matter what they choose to do. And now correct me if I'm wrong, about 81 years ago, women made the weapons we used in World War II. Did we not? Did we not help make the weapons that they used on the very battlefield? Did we not help them? Did we not run this country pretty much? And a lot of people say now that we're not strong enough. If we were strong enough back then, we're strong enough now. Women that are alive right now, this is the best time to become strong and independent and do what makes you happy. So if the career that you want to do is male-dominated or somebody discourages you to do it, do not listen to them. One inspiring quote that got me motivated was by Miss Nicki Minaj. She says, "Barbs, stay in school. Don't you ever be lazy. Don't you ever complain about hard work. Work hard, it pays off." Thank you.
Thank you, Bre. That was great. And I never expected we'd have a quote from Nicki Minaj in an honors project. So there you go. All right, Kayla Koper is up next, and she's going to talk to us about socially assistive robotics. Excuse me. This was for her mathematics class, so this is a calculus-focused mathematical perspective, and her faculty sponsor was Jillian Miller. Do you want me to introduce them both? Or do you want a break? You can introduce them. All right, and Kayla's actually giving us a 2-for-1. So her second project is Educational Psychology, a Neurodiversity Perspective, and her sponsor for that was Diane Ward. And also PTK has had a whole neurodiversity theme this year, so very awesome. Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kayla Koper, and for those of you who don't know me, I plan to pursue my PhD in biomedical engineering and study socially assistive robotics. It's also known as SARS, so for the sake of convenience, that's probably what I'm going to call it today. My professor, Jillian Miller, taught me higher level calculus, which will be relevant to my career. And so I decided to explore this in depth, and it is actually responsible for me deciding what I want to do with socially assistive robotics. So this honors project is really impactful to me. So socially assistive robotics is kind of an intersection between assistive and interactive robotics. There is a model that shows this. Here I list some of those differences, but I will spare you for the sake of time. The main difference is that in socially interactive, the main goal is to interact, versus assistive, the goal is to assist. Well, SARS does both, and it can be used in many different applications. So some of the major faces of SARS are Cynthia Brizio, Dr. Brian Scazzalotti, and Dr. Kathy Bodine. I will detail them kind of later on. So that is Cynthia Brizio. She created the first at-home robot, the first SAR that really hit the market. His name was Jibo. They went on to use that in autism research, but that was only done at like certain universities. His main goal was just be the first to be an at-home, on-the-market SARS that wasn't for research purposes. Her interest in robotics was sparked by watching Star Wars, actually. I find that really cool. So this is Dr. Brian Scazzalotti. He runs the Social Robotics Lab at Yale University. They do a wonderful autism program. They use the socially assistive robotics to help children with autism develop skills. That's just one of the many applications that I will discuss later on. So this is the international conference that kind of inspired me to look more into the research. I have a big book of publications, and this is the conference that is responsible for over half of the publications in that huge book. The others come from notable universities in Japan. They also work on mostly autism research, but there are some with cerebral palsy, working with the elderly to combat depression. What I plan to do with it is I plan to create robots that simulate neurodivergent behaviors, so like autistic or ADHD behaviors, in order to train professionals to work with these individuals. So there are many different applications, most notably with the elderly and with children with cerebral palsy or autism. This is Dr. Kathy Bodine. She runs the program at UC Denver, where they work with cerebral palsy patients. They encourage movement and physical therapy through interactive play. SARS can be used to combat depression in the elderly. With the elderly, they act as companions to combat mental health issues. This can also apply to anxiety or just simple loneliness. So most notably, SARS has been used in the field of autism research, and it can help build skills in children through interaction. But I just want to note, one must be really cautious in order to avoid poor goals, which ultimately hurt the child. So these might look like forcing eye contact or stopping the stimming, which actually acts as a coping mechanism for these children. By eliminating that, it actually does more harm than good. This is the article that inspired me to pursue a career in creating neurodivergent robots, so to speak. Its research was very promising to me. I am so thankful for this honors project because it helped me determine what I want to do with this application. Of course, because it was a calculus project, I did explore many mathematical applications. For the sake of time, I will only highlight these briefly. Much of the calculus in SARS research involves something called qualitative trajectory calculus, which describes the relative motion of points in a qualitative framework. So here is an example. This is called QTC Basic, and it uses two relative points of motion. They're called K and I, respectively. And there is a line of reference to which they are referred to. It depends on the situation, and so there are lots of transitions that can occur. And that's when you sort of transition to something called QTC double cross. And this is where we just add two more of those variables, two more side points to which objects may move, so maybe to the left or the right rather than just forward or farther away from a point. This is what that might look like, just two more variables added to the equation. So transitions are very key to QTC as objects change as they move. Their location changes in proximity to other objects in different scenarios. So depending on what you're trying to do, this is what an example of that transition may look like. This is called a conceptual neighborhood diagram. And so as you can see, What I wanted to show was that there are no direct transitions between any of these points, even though they look adjacent. It looks like a spider web, it looks like they're all connected. But if you look closely, there are no actual direct transitions. Integration is used to find the set of possible states. So as you do these transitions, there is a certain subset of possible states that that point can be in. So you basically, through simple unification, you integrate them, and that is an example to decide what that might look like. So also involved in SARS are imitation learning, and so that involves the presence of dynamic movement primitives as well as dynamic time warping. So these are a little more complex. While I can't go in depth with you today, I do feel that some of you may enjoy researching some of these topics, particularly dynamic movement primitives. That's a differential equation, so for those of you who have to take differential equations, it would be helpful to know those because they are applied to higher level calculations. And dynamic time warping is just an algorithm. It analyzes motion series that change temporally, so over time. And it compares the human-robot interaction with gestures or whatever you're trying to accomplish with the robot. This honors project was highly stimulating, and I am forever grateful to Dr. Miller for helping me find what my true career goals are, even if that maybe wasn't her intention. Thank you guys for listening to that, and I will pull up my second presentation. Hello again. So last semester I had the pleasure of taking educational psychology with the wonderful Dr. Ward. Educational psychology is a class which explores in depth the development of children and how development relates to their growth and learning. I chose to focus on a perspective of neurodiversity because this is a concept which makes each and every child unique, meaning that educators must familiarize themselves with related issues in order to create a successful and equitable environment. So, what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity describes a variation in the human brain regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other sort of mental functions. So a neurodivergent individual may include someone with autism, they may have ADHD or many other conditions, as you can see. But most notably when talking about neurodiversity, autism or ADHD is implied. One of the first concepts explored in educational psychology is that the foundations of learning and morality start young. In other words, children are the optimal facilitators of positive change. If you want to make a positive change on a societal level, teaching these foundational concepts of diversity and kindness really goes a long way. So each student is unique. They will vary in learning styles and preferences, and this section kind of explores this. Many in the field of educational psychology, they fear that labeling children with certain conditions will sort of unintentionally create a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure, or maybe it will hold them back in some way. But when inclusion and accommodation are implemented correctly, there are many foreseeable benefits. By understanding factors fundamental to a student's identity, a lot of students with neurodivergent conditions consider that a part of themselves. They have access to more opportunities to gain appropriate accommodations, but also just learn more about their own needs, strengths, and weaknesses in order to grow. However, functioning labels are not the solution to this. Often labeling someone as high or low functioning is only harmful as it gatekeeps resources on both ends. If you tell someone they're low functioning, they're going to be limited. If you tell someone they're high functioning, maybe they need an accommodation, and someone will say, well, you don't need it, you're high functioning. So labels are misleading. No one is more or less autistic, for instance. There is simply an autistic person with unique strengths and challenges, and this will differ with each person. There's no such thing as being more or less ADHD or autistic. This in turn can cause something called masking. And for those who are not familiar with this concept, it is where a neurodivergent individual hides their traits, and in turn they may not get the help they need. These students are the students who may fall through the cracks of the system. People may not realize they need accommodations, may not realize that their learning style is condition specific. So what can educators do? Well, language is a big one. So focusing on language, what do your students prefer to be called? If you're unsure, just ask them. Many autistic people, for instance, prefer the term autistic. When you say person with autism, it implies that they have some sort of disease or that they're a burden, and that's not a message we want to send to our children. So educational psychology teaches students of the IDEA Act, which is zero reject, and it defines different types of disabilities in a way that can help find accommodations for them. It aims to have a least restrictive environment, or LRE, and it advocates for the rights of students and their families to help them succeed in school and to reach their fullest potentials. Students with this often have an IEP, which is an individualized education program. And this helps them get the accommodations they need, and they're subject to change based on, changing needs. As a child grows, they're going to develop, they're going to have different needs and different strengths. So Section 504 is another avenue for this. Student needs can be met, and this can actually extend beyond schools in certain cases, and it is part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. As you know, diversity is important and integral to how children learn. Different perspectives are key to how a child functions within a classroom. A notable example with neurodiversity is those assigned female at birth and people of color are underdiagnosed significantly. And stereotypes, including that some groups have less prevalency of neurodivergent conditions, which is absolutely not true. And language barriers and other factors can hinder students in succeeding within the classroom. Perhaps not being able to speak clearly may be a neurodivergent issue rather than a language barrier, but someone might not pick up on this, or it could be a combination of the two. Here are some traits that are often missed in these children. So there's going to be more masking, there's going to be more appropriate special interest. A lot of times with girls, if they're really, really into dolls and they like lining up their dolls and organizing them in their case, it's not going to be the stereotype of like a little boy lining up his trains. It's the same behavior, but with girls it's considered normal. Subtle stimming, so a girl or someone assigned female at birth may twist their hair. They may play with their necklace. No one would consider that stimming upon first glance, but it absolutely is. It's just a more masked version. And social floating and mimicry. People of color, women, those assigned female at birth are really good at this. They're good at mimicking those around them to appear normal, and this can cause them to get missed in a classroom. Teachers can absolutely make a difference though. They can make classrooms better for all students of all neurotypes. So this is what neurodiversity may look like in a classroom. A student may be solitary, they may be nonverbal or selectively mute. They may have trouble sitting still. They may not make much eye contact, which upon first glance may make them just look shy. They have difficulty learning and things that don't interest them. Someone might just consider it a troubled child. However, these are not troubled children. They may just not have the accommodations they need. So teachers can help by integrating different kinds of group work, or maybe avoiding it in certain instances. They need to keep in mind sensory challenges within a classroom, so maybe the lights are too bright, or just they need to have a place to calm down. And constantly changing routines can be really distressful for neurodivergent students. A lot of times, if they can't predict what's going to happen in their day, it can cause them to melt down. There are ways which students can help. Teachers can look for bullying. They can look for someone who has not that many friends or maybe floats in between groups. They can look for sensory discomfort. They can look for rigid black and white thinking. They can look for students who are a little bit odd but active, but maybe just aren't there enough socially to function within a friend group. And they can look for students who are having trouble with instructions, because it may not be that they're not listening, it may be that they have trouble with multiple instructions in a row. And of course, one of the most important things is looking closely and making sure the classroom is just an equitable place, regardless of accommodation. Accommodation should be available to students regardless of a diagnosis, because there are those kids who slip through the cracks. Without a diagnosis, you can still have a quiet corner. You can still have motion breaks just to help someone, focus. And teachers should just be aware of potential sensory triggers. So if you know you're going to be going to like a school assembly with flashing lights, just be courteous to students and look for those discomforts. Don't encourage harmful therapy. So ABA therapy has been shown to be harmful in nature, and it strips children of their coping mechanisms and individuality when the intention was to help. The goal should never be to mold a child into behaving like a neurotypical kid. So the biggest thing that teachers can do is just teach kids to love their differences. Because if a child can't appreciate their own individuality and the individuality of everyone else around them, it's not going to promote someone going into society and being successful. It's going to further promote division, which is not what we need in today's times. In general, educators should just stick to a rule of kindness and use their best judgment to help all kinds of minds grow. There's just some important autism facts. Thank you.
Mason Rodgers is our next speaker, and the project is called Interdisciplinary Project on Food Insecurity. So we're going to see a video, and his faculty, the faculty sponsor was Matt Waters, who is with us today. Thank you, Matt.
Hello. For my honors project, I edited together a video of interviews featuring faculty members and their students involved in the interdisciplinary project related to food insecurity in order to raise awareness for said food insecurity. This video is hopefully to be shown to other faculty members so that they can participate in other interdisciplinary projects, and I hope you enjoy.
For the spring 2022 semester, a group of faculty from different disciplines,
History, Mass Communications,
Anatomy and Physiology 1,
and Anatomy and Physiology 2,
chose a single topic for our students to focus on for one assignment.
It's an interdisciplinary project.
Okay, in my class, the students were divided into groups, and they have to select a disease which are related with some of the organ systems that we cover during the semester. Each group select the disease, and then they have to study pathophysiology and link it with food insecurity.
Diabetic ketoacidosis was our focus, and basically we wanted to see all these diseases and things that are going on with people. How does that relate to how much food they're getting or what kinds of food they're getting? So my group actually found a map, one of my group members found a map, and it was like all of the United States, and we saw the direct correlation between how many grocery stores were in an area and how many people had this diabetic ketoacidosis disease.
You get into these rural areas, people don't have a lot of resources to healthy foods, they're going to fast food, they're getting these cheap foods because they don't make a lot of money, that's all they can afford. Their blood sugars are higher, they're at higher risk for diabetes, and they're not getting their insulin. So it all just makes a big mess.
We've been working in my modern U.S. history classes to examine the history of both hunger and food insecurity in the U.S. since the Civil War. And what we've been examining is not just the existence of those problems, but the government response to those problems, and how that has changed from food insecurity and hunger should be a community problem to it's a responsibility of the government towards its citizens.
At the start of the school lunch program, we talked about that and how that was really a successful pilot program under FDR. And really seeing that it works and being able to feed children at school gave them incentive to go to school.
For my Anatomy and Physiology 1 class, the assignment was focused on the metabolism chapter. We worked on aspects of food insecurity as it related to metabolism, and we did this through the use of discussion boards and in-class discussion throughout the course of the semester.
When I thought of eating, it was more of a simplistic view. Now I'm seeing that we need it for energy. We need it to have proper nutrients and minerals in our body to do little things like making energy, breathing, just things that you just don't think about that just happen naturally. We have to have the food to do that.
Scurvy is kind of like a historical kind of deficiency in vitamin C. I actually looked into my ancestry tree, and I have found out a lot of historical records that some of my past family members died from the extensive scurvy because they were pirates, and it was very cool. So it kind of means a little bit more towards me since my past family members in my ancestry tree died from it.
For my TV production class, the assignment was to learn more about what Roane State is doing to help students who are facing food insecurity. My students interviewed Dr. Lisa Stephenson, Dean of Students, to find out more about the food pantries and grab-and-go snack offerings, and find out more about the resources available to students and their families.
The food pantry is a place which we learned is available to all students regardless of how much money you make, where you're at. All you need to do is just show up, give your Roane State ID number, and you can just walk out with some food. Easy as that. Not enough students know about the food pantry, and we need more people talking about it, get the word out there.
The interdisciplinary project, this was great because it allowed students from different classes to learn about this universal problem, but through the lens of different disciplines and different ideas about how food insecurity affects society.
This project localized the topic for our students. They now know that food insecurity can affect people right here in our community, and they know ways that Roane State is taking action to help students and their families.
It was really interesting because the students learn how bad choices, making bad food choices, affects the human body.
This interdisciplinary project was useful for the students in looking at a different angle for the metabolism chapter, which is generally difficult for them. It allowed them to look outside of the box and see how this topic of social justice can be applied to multiple disciplines in their college, as well as thinking about how those topics relate to food insecurity in their own community. Thank you to all the students that were involved in all your hard work, and we look forward to more faculty being involved in our interdisciplinary studies in following semesters.
Thank you, Mason, for sharing that video. That was exciting to see student perspectives and faculty perspectives on this important program and this important topic. Good, good. So Beth and Jimmy, if you'll please join me. We'd like to go ahead and first recognize all of the presenters this evening. So we have a certificate and pin for each of you. So I'm going to let Jimmy kind of call you up, and Beth and I will give you your little certificate and pin. And if you'll just go ahead and kind of hang out up here with all of us to kind of get your awards.
Treisy Gonzalez, Melissa Jackson, Kayla Koper, Savannah Mahery, Becca Marshall, Soledad Olvera, Bethany Polson, Sophia Vetter Ryan, Bre Broaddus, Mason Rodgers. Taylor Ray Beats, Kenneth Edward Dooley, Patton Fishel, Savannah Mahery, Becca Marshall, Haley Amber Quinn, Kaylee Nicole Bullard, Treisy Gonzalez, Kayla Koper, Soledad Olvera, Dylan Febnard.
We had some great projects. I hope you got a chance to see everything. Celebrate your students that you came with. They do such great work, and we love having them here. And thank you again for joining us at our honors banquet.